For a fleeting moment, Callis thought Val Petrus might collapse. The many marble steps leading to the heaven hall were steep, and the young arcanogeologist had weathered much over the last few days. And now here they stood before the grand conclave, wedged between a burly free gilder and a grizzled witch hunter. Unlikely companions, to be sure. They had come in all swiftness from the arcanogeologist's guild house, where a deadly raid had seen its chambers ransacked, its guilders slain, and the place itself overrun by a swarm of voracious rats. Armand Callis and his old colleague Hannibal Toll, along with Petrus, had barely escaped with their lives. And now, stinking of vermin, and in Petrus' case at least, caked in dried blood, they faced a very different ordeal. "Tell us, then," offered Sebastian Mensch, the broad and bearded master patriarch, glaring at the shriveled figure standing at the end of his hammer-shaped table. "Why have we been gathered here in such haste?" He flicked a stern glance, first at Toll, then at Callis, who stayed quiet. Hammerhal was under attack in the eastern districts, a large swathe of the city's garrison marshalling to its defence. The path back to Heaven Hall had been fraught, to say the least. Privation, war, and insidious fear had wormed into the populace and driven them to the edge. Callis felt it in the air, a febrile tension that threatened to overspill. "I can only assume it is a matter of dire import to warrant the attention of the inestimable Armand Callis and Hannibal Toll," uttered a shadow, sitting halfway down the table, Zane Dolores. "Ah," he added, "and I see you have brought young Val Petrus with you. I know something of the guild's work. I think we should listen to what they have to say." The so-called hidden hand possessed an incongruous. The so-called hidden hand possessed a cheerful demeanour, or at least "I can only assume it is a matter of dire import to warrant the attention of the inestimable Armand Callis and Hannibal Toll," uttered a shadow sitting halfway down the table, Zane Dolores. "Ah," he added, "and I see you have brought young Val Petrus with you. I know something of the guild's work. I think we should listen to what they have to say." The so-called hidden hand possessed a cheerful demeanour, or at least he had the last time Callis. The so-called hidden hand possessed a usually cheerful demeanour, at least he had the last time Callis and Toll met him, but he could turn from warm bonhomie to icy regard in a moment. He wore a white mask and a thick hood to conceal his features, even at council, and consequently the rigours of the past weeks did not show in his false face as they did his fellow conclavists. It was rumoured that Dolores had never been seen without the mask, and tongues wagged at what might be underneath it, at least until Dolores silenced those tongues through his feared guild of seekers. Callis had no wish to be on the business end of a seeker's bait. Involuntary, his hand strayed to the hilt of his sword in the master spy's presence as he exchanged a wary glance with Toll. For his part, the witch hunter appeared irritatingly at ease, laying a gentle hand on Petrus's shoulder as a subtle cue for the gilder to answer. "It is the arcanothermic readings." "It is the arcanothermic readings," said Petrus shrilly, as if startled, wiping a hand across their sweat-dappled brow before loudly clearing their throat. "Stolen from my guild. Priceless research. Gone. Taken. We have been... That is to say, our findings, every nexus and font of arcana, every ley line, we have been exhaustive. Bro furrowed in consternation. Mensch raised a hand, and Petra's mouth clamped shut. "With the greatest respect, Gilder, what are you blathering about?" Callis gave a weary sigh as he smoothed the days-old stubble on his chin. Another glance at Toll confirmed this wasn't going well. This poor arcanogeologist had almost reached their limit, it seemed. Callis supposed finding oneself amongst the gnawed corpses of one's fellows would do that to a person. He had seen it before in soldiers who had seen much, who had seen and experienced too much. Mensch went on. We have reavers at our gates, parts of the city in flames, riots and shortages left and right, and we of the conclave are expected to heed some half-cooked ramblings about buried nexus points and ley lines. He looked to Callis and Toll, as did a nervous Petrus. Callis's sigh deepened. He had thought Delorius might speak up in Petrus' defence. The skittish young gilder was one of his informants after all. Oh, so Callis assumed. At a surreptitious gesture from Toll, he noticed the spymaster suddenly appeared more distracted. He noticed the spymaster appeared suddenly distracted, his thoughts evidently somewhere else. The other conclavists looked scarcely more than engaged. Well, pressed Catrick Gillion, the prime commander, having exhausted her patience, which was ever a half-filled cup. What is the meaning of this? She jabbed an armoured finger at Callis and Toll. You two did Cinderfall a service, sorting out of that King's Blood mess, so you got some credit, but I warn you, it is rapidly running out. Perhaps half-filled was too generous, Callis reflected. To his relief, Toll spoke up. We found the guild house of the arcanogeologists attacked. Its guilders killed, and their research either taken or destroyed. At least one of the dead had been poisoned, while the rest had been nearly completely devoured. He hesitated as he found the right word. Friend here, Petrus, believes the guild had uncovered a calamity in the making, one that could extend the breadth of the patch or even further. Toll dipped the brim of his hat to the arcanogeologist in a bid for them to explain further. Petrus moistened their lips and did as requested. It is, as I've been trying to say, what we thought we knew of the ley lines of the Parch, or even all of Ashqui, is only part of the truth. Our readings strongly suggest that they are not merely confined to the surface. Metallith fragments, subterranean depths, the ley lines are everywhere, extended like nerve clusters. Petrus splayed their fingers as if to emphasize the point. And something is happening. Seismic variants, geomagical fluctuations, the readings all point to one thing. Witches? Asked an irritated-looking Drobjohn, the high artillerist. Callis suspected the Duardin had more of a head for the arcanogeologist's expertise than the others, but even he looked impatient. The ley lines, Petrus replied. It's as if they're on fire. It presages a major, imminent, and potentially realm-wide trauma, an unprecedented cataclysm. Murmurs of mild alarm travelled the table. Mensch quirked an eyebrow. And you have proof of this? Shoulders slumped. Petrus slowly shook their head. Then I fail to see what choice I have but to stop waiting for our... Mensch began, about to pronounce judgment, when a sharp hit from Delorius stopped him. The hidden hand rose to his feet like silk against air, a stiletto suddenly in his hand. Something lurks in here which does not belong. Callis shared a look with Toll, the old witch hunter raising an eyebrow. The tide of vermin in the guildhouse rose anew in his mind. Mensch visibly paled, as did several others of the conclave. The eve of 4 killings still recent in the memory. Callis noticed the Master Patriarch's gaze went to the old bloodstains, faded but still visible on the wormwood table. Delorius's eyes, though, were on the shadows around the room that had abruptly deepened. Taking his lead from the Master Spy, Toll pulled forth a ragged length of hemp rope from a pouch beneath his cloak and proceeded to light it with a match. What is it? Asked Catrick, her one good eye narrowed as she reached for the jewelled hilt of her sword. Toll was watching the fire as it bit and smoked along the rope, the flames crackling orange at first before changing to lurid green. Callis drew his pistol. Skaven, he uttered to shallow gasps around the room, remembering their terrifying mission in the sewers below the city. "In the heaven hall," protested Drobjohn, though his keen Duardin gaze flitted from shadow to shadow. "Impossible." A hubbub of minor panic began to ripple through the chamber, threatening to boil over. Mensch turned, and about to summon the guards when Dolores bade for quiet. An eerie stillness descended, threaded with unease. Callis had been watching the darkness too, as an oily shadow, long and thin, like a night-black talon, crept up the wall and onto the ceiling. There it spread into an inky pool, drawing the eyes of the room. Raising his pistol, Callis took aim at the shadow, but before he could fire, he saw the smoke from Toll's rope pulling to the side, not the ceiling. The Free Guilder was already turning, as a sudden flurry of movement caught his eye from the penumbra at the edge of the chamber. Light flashed against metal, spinning, sharp, a Triskele. Callis cried out a warning, turning, pistol booming thunderously at a ragged shape that had materialized as if from scraps of shadow. Too late. Petrus squeaked as the bladed missile threw towards their throat. A hand's breadth before it found its mark, Toll swept out his cloak and deflected the Triskele in mid-flight. Pulling a second pistol, Callis fired again as anarchy seized the Heaven Hall. He only wounded the creature, a black swathed rat thing that sprang backwards and flipped onto the table as Toll added his weapon to the fusillade. Mensch was bellowing for the guards as the Heaven Hall erupted in clamour, and the Skaven assassin brandished 3 knives, one in each blade-fingered paw, and one clutched in its tail, each sizzling with a corrosive substance. Snarling, it leapt for Petrus. Almost faster than Callis could follow, Dolores lunged with his stiletto. At first he appeared to have missed his mark, until his form seemed to blur like a smear on an artist's canvas, a shadowy simulacrum, echoing the original but for the minor shift in position. Callis blinked, barely able to pass what he was seeing as the shadowy blade pierced the assassin's throat. The hidden hand withdrew, the stiletto folding back into nothing as the man himself stood innocuously over the dead Skaven, hands tucked within his robes, expression inscrutable behind the mask. A bullet hole still smouldered in the Ratman's leg. "A fine shot in the circumstances, Free Guilder," said Dolores, giving Callis a slight nod. "I think you might have winged it." "Sigmar's blood!" cursed Mensch, as the conclavists returned to their seats. Legillion sheathed her blade, but rested a hand on the pommel. Drobborn sniffed his indifference, but the Duardin's gaze didn't stray from the corpse lying on the table. Let's see it then, he grumbled, doubtless wanting to be sure it was dead. Dolores carefully pulled back the creature's hood to reveal the rattish snout of the Skaven, its dead eyes staring blankly, tongue lolling from its mouth. "A spy in our midst." "You would know, I suppose," muttered Toll, who would wander over to examine the Ratman corpse. He earned a side glance from Dolores. "I wouldn't antagonize that one, old friend," Callis murmured in his ear. Toll seemed unconcerned, his mind apparently on other matters. The red men are growing bold. You would know, I suppose. You would know, I suppose, muttered Toll, who had wandered over to examine the Ratman corpse. He earned a side glance from Dolores. I wouldn't antagonize that one, old friend, Callis murmured into his ear. Toll seemed unconcerned, his mind apparently on other matters. The Ratman are growing bold if they are sending assassins into our most protected halls. He glanced up at the ceiling. I believe its ingress was probably via the roof. Mensch nodded, shaken but still angry. He gestured to the guards, mildly seething at their ineffectuality. Burn it, and conduct a thorough search, he said. As the guards hurried to remove the Skaven, Mensch's attention fell on Callis, Toll, and their nervous charge. It seems we are in your debt again. He turned to Zane Dolores. And to you, Spymaster. Resuming his feet, Dolores gave no indication he had heard or even cared for the Master Patriarch's praise. Mensch appeared only slightly perturbed as he turned back to Petrus. Now, he added, regarding the archaeologist with fresh respect and motioning to an empty seat, tell us again of these readings, honoured Gilda.